Hey guys, we're the Sports Addicts podcast, and we're back today with a video about our AFC North predictions. Ashwell, take it away.
Yeah, all right. So for the AFC North, I pretty much have the same pecking order as the 2019 season. I think Baltimore wins the division and the entire AFC at 13-3. I have the Steelers as the fifth seed at 11-5, and the Browns at 9-7, just missing out as the eighth seed, and the Cincinnati Bengals at 2-14. Yeah. So for the Baltimore Ravens, I think they're pretty much the class of the AFC. Their secondary, led by Marlon Humphrey and Marcus Peters, and their defensive line of Calais Campbell and Matthew Judon will lead them to be a top 5 unit. And their offense, I think their offense is solid overall. I just think their wide receivers need to prove that they're capable of lifting up the passing game for the Ravens. Willie Snead and Marquise Brown have not proven much in their first year or twos. And I think if the Ravens really want to be more of a passing attack that they say they're going to be, they need to make sure that the wide receivers can get open and that Lamar Jackson takes fewer hits and can stay in the pocket for longer. For the Steelers, I think it's just simple. They're just going to get Ben Roethlisberger back, and that'll definitely add a few wins. Their defensive front seven is probably the best in the league. They got T.J. Watt, Stephon Tuitt, Devin Bush, Bud Dupree, all those guys. And I think 11-5 is a good number for them. For the Browns, I think they're the most talented non-quarterback roster in the league. But the biggest question mark is obviously Baker Mayfield. He had more advertisements than he had wins last year. So if he's going to prove that he's a franchise quarterback that the Browns thought he was when they selected him with the number one pick, he's got to prove that they can win at least 10 games. And there's been reports that Kevin Stefanski is not afraid to bench Baker Mayfield if he's not up to par. So I think with all his weapons, he has no excuses but to perform. And I don't think they're going to make the playoffs. I don't think he's a franchise quarterback. So I think 9-7 is a good number. And finally, for the Cincinnati Bengals, I have them at 2-14. I think they're really going to struggle with a really tough division in the AFC North with 3 playoff caliber teams. Their offensive line is completely unproven. Their best player on offensive line is Jonah Williams, who tore his ACL, I believe, last year and hasn't played a single game yet. So their offensive line is full of unproven players. I get the argument that their wide receiver core is good. They've got Tyler Boyd, I believe, T. Higgins, and A.J. Green. But Higgins is a rookie. A.J. Green hasn't played since December of 2018. And they're just also unproven. We have not seen anything from them in the last 12 months to prove that any of those players can be really formidable to help out Joe Burrow. Joe Mixon is a very underrated running back. I think he'll definitely take some load off of him. But I think their defense is just outside of Geno Atkins. Geno Atkins, I just don't think they've got many pieces. They overpaid Trey Waynes to come play for them. I think they paid like $14 million or something, which is completely overpriced. But I think 2-14 is a good number for them.
That's a terrible prediction. 2-14 is absolutely horrendous, bro. They still have DJ Reader. They have Carlos Dunlap. They have Geno Atkins. All right, it's not like their defense is bad yet, but they still do have some talent. And the Bengals, they have their offensive weapons. They're pretty good. Mixon, Green, Boyd.
They've added players.
Having a great service.
They haven't lost anyone significant.
Exactly. 2-14 is a terrible prediction. All right. Exactly.
I mean, look at the defensive lines that they're playing in just the AFC North alone. All right, you've got the Cleveland Browns led by Myles Garrett and Olivier Vernon. You've got the Pittsburgh Steelers.
They have a formidable one themselves too. I can make the argument that
I know. I'm not saying they have a bad defensive line. I'm just saying if you look at the defensive lines and if you look at the offensive line of the Bengals, what the offensive line is going to be protecting for Joe Burrow, I think he's going to have a rough time. I think this is
they can do quick passes, bro. Their wide receiver group is really, really good. It has so much potential.
Yeah, it's similar to the Chargers situation last year, obviously without the defense, but offensively, it's pretty much similar to them. They have the weapons.
You're saying the offensive weapons that the Chargers have is comparable to the Bengals? Seriously?
Actually, yeah, they are pretty comparable.
It is. If you think about it, it is. Besides maybe the tight end, but the Chargers tight end's half the time injured anyway.
Exactly, yeah.
I don't AJ Green, I know he's a great player, but he's 31. He's going to be 32. And
Joe Mixon's better than Eckler and Gordon.
Yeah, running the ball, obviously.
You could argue Gordon's better. Last year, he had a really, really bad O-line, and he did not run the ball very well.
He's always had a bad
Joe
O-line.
Mixon,
That's a
that's a top
pathetic
three O-line.
argument. The Chargers have had a pathetic O-line for like their entire franchise.
Yeah, and
always been like that.
He was a Pro Bowl. He was a Pro Bowl running back before 2019.
Pro Bowl doesn't mean
Pro Bowl. Mitch Trubisky made the Pro Bowl.
Exactly.
The biggest bust of all time.
As a running back, I'm saying, as a running back, he's before the 2019 season, you could argue he's a top 5 or 6 running back, and Joe Mixon is probably around that same area. So I think Joe Mixon and Melvin Gordon are pretty.
No, wait, Gordon is washed up.
No, Gordon's regressed.
Way better
after his sit-out. He's
okay,
I feel like the Browns are overhyped, completely overhyped, just like last year. Their defense. Their secondary is still a question mark. What Carl Joseph.
Their linebackers are actually terrible. They have the worst linebackers core in the entire NFL.
Yeah, they lost their only good linebacker in Joe Schobert. Their cornerbacks are still a question mark. Denzel Ward's pretty good, but Greedy Williams was just average last year. Average to below average. Their safeties.
Were the safeties again? It's not like they have some great safeties either.
Yeah, they swapped safeties with the Raiders. That's all they did for that. And then for their D line, obviously Myles Garrett's good. I think they still have Sheldon Richardson. But besides them, they're just average at best at the D-line. So
they have Olivier Vernon too. He's a solid.
Yeah, Olivier Vernon's paid more than his production.
He's still a good player, though. He's still. I think their defensive line is top 8 to 10 in the league, and we all know
8 to 10 is not going to carry them past their below average secondary.
They have.
It's an average secondary, bro.
Denzel Ward's a solid player. I mean,
yeah, one player out of 5 is solid. The rest of them are unproven. Grant Delpit's unproven. Carl Joseph is just a hard hitter. Greedy Williams is unproven.
We're not saying they're going to have a great defense. I think they probably have a top 10 defense. I think if they really want to prove,
okay, that's
a pretty bold statement.
I mean, we've seen how big of a difference a good defensive line can make on a team. Just look at the 49ers.
Just like the Niners defensive line carried Jimmy Garoppolo to the Super Bowl.
In 2018, they had one of the worst secondaries in the league. They had the fewest turnovers in NFL history, and then within one season, that defensive line improved with Nick Bosa and Dee Ford, and they had they led the league in passing yards.
Yeah,
the defense.
They didn't exactly get a Nick Bosa this year. Right? And then entire Niners defensive line career, Arik Armstead started playing like Aaron Donald last year. No one expected him to be that good.
I think we can save the NFC West talk for another video. But my point is the defensive line of the Browns will definitely help that entire unit.
Mm-hmm.
And I think top 10 is not an outrageous take by any means.
Okay,
yeah, but that's the only thing that.
Yeah, for the Steelers, basically, I have them that if they face off with the Ravens in the playoffs, I feel like they'll crush the Ravens. I think they have the Ravens number, and I feel like if Mike Tomlin can get like a week to prepare for Lamar Jackson, he's gonna find a way to do it. That's my bold take of the AFC.
It's actually reasonable. I mean, last year the Ravens choked. The year before the Ravens choked. So.
Yeah, Pittsburgh always plays them tough, and I feel like their defense is really like perfect to handle Lamar Jackson and their running game, J.K. Dobbins and Mark Ingram.
Yeah,
I think their defense sets up well because their front 7 is probably the best in the league.
Yep.
And we all know Baltimore has a great tight end and offensive line group.
Exactly, and they have the linebackers to match it. They have the safety and Minkah Fitzpatrick to match it. And the one weakness on their defense is their cornerbacks. But
the Baltimore
they still have Joe Hayden. It's not like a weakness either. It's just like the worst part of their. It's the worst.
Joe Hayden is not bad. Joe Hayden was
exactly
pretty good.
Their worst position in their defense is like a good. It's like it's much better than like maybe like 80% of the NFL. Joe Hayden is still a really good cornerback.
I think
like they really don't have that many weaknesses on defenses.
I think the offensive quarterback of Ben Roethlisberger, right? He's 38 years old, coming off a major shoulder injury. I think that's the biggest key. If he can somehow return to his form of 2018 and early 2019, even though he didn't play that well, if he can return to that form, I think they're a serious contender in the AFC. He's in the AFC. I think they're probably the 3rd best team in my opinion. If he can play at that level.
Yeah, behind the Chiefs and the Ravens.
But the rest of their offense is question marks, though. Like, is Juju going to be as good?
Juju, with the AB. Is James Conner going to stay healthy, even though he looks ripped in the offseason?
That is absolutely – the body that he has it defies the laws of physics.
Their offensive line is still one of the most underrated offensive lines.
They have a very good offensive line. Yeah. Villanueva, De Castro. They got a lot of good players.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think the Bengals, you're 2-14 is just completely outrageous. It's blasphemy at this point. Like, how can they be worse than they did last
They
year?
have a
with their
better chance of
quarterback?
winning the Super
Like
Bowl
one of
than
the
they do
best.
have two. Okay, well, yeah, it's much more likely they're gonna make the playoffs than go 2-14. Their team
Exactly.
is
Yeah.
not that bad.
Yeah.
There's so many more.
They've added talent. They haven't like.
You could argue they have one of the worst O-lines in the league.
Yeah, that's fine, but they had the same O-line last year, so.
And
they're
he's a
adding
rookie
players to that
quarter.
O-line.
He's a
Connor
rookie
Williams
quarter.
wasn't there last year.
Oh
He's a
yeah,
rookie
rookie
quarterback.
quarterback led what 70%
Well,
completion.
who are they gonna?
That's
Who was the guy
absolutely-
last year? I forgot his name. Ryan Finley. He sucks.
Yeah.
All right, yeah. You guys are acting as if Joe Burrow is like one of the best prospects ever. This guy took 3 years to win a starting position.
Okay, I don't
right?
care if he took 3 years. He put up one of the greatest college seasons ever. I don't like.
Okay, yeah, it's
I don't know,
one
we just-
season. Before that season, he was a 6th-round pick. That's what they're projecting him to be. I mean, yes, he improved his game dramatically, but I mean, if you look at the great prospects, like it's not just one season. If you look at like guys like Andrew Luck, John Elway, I mean, even Trevor Lawrence, those guys have proven that from the moment they step foot on college campus, they're great quarterbacks. But it took 3 years for Joe Burrow to really even get a starting job. So I think he's a solid quarterback prospect. He's not generational as many people say that he is.
Okay, he's not generational, but okay,
But he's
he
better
can
than
argue
who they
that
had
he has
last
the same
year.
weapons. He has the same or even better weapons than he did in LSU.
Yeah, I mean that's college football. You can't. It's not apples to apples. You can't compare a college football team, one of the best college football teams of all time, to terrible
They've
offensive
only
team.
added this offseason. They added Trey Waynes
Exactly.
to replace who are their quarterbacks.
DJ
Trey
Reader.
Kirkpatrick.
Trey Waynes was like the second or third best cornerback in Minnesota. He's not, and they paid what $14
Actually, you
million
can
for
argue
him.
he's the best there because Xavier Rhodes was a negative last year, and now he's on the Colts. So
Okay, hold on. We'll argue about that later, but okay. He's not that bad. He's still serviceable. He can be an average starter.
he was bad last year, though. That's for sure.
He's
All right,
overpaid.
guys.
That's true. $14 million is way too much for a guy of his caliber.
Yeah, I think I'm still sticking with my 2-14 prediction. But yeah, that basically sums up our video. Thank you guys for watching.